And I would like to introduce to you our Ron Frost, our speaker here, our guest speaker today. And his message is the one and only today. And Ron is an author, a speaker, a life coach, and a sales coach. And he is also a licensed spiritual practitioner, studied under Reverend Shell here at the Center for Spiritual Living, Cape Coral. However, is now based out of the Center for Spiritual Living in Sarasota. Ron's popular book, Getting Unstuck, The 9 Keys to Creating More Prosperity, Fulfillment, and Joy, is a practical self-coaching guide to help the reader live a more self-aware and empowered life. And he and his book have been featured on numerous podcasts as well as AM and FM radio talk shows across the nation. He is the founder of Positive Momentum Coaching, a leader of the Southwest Florida Speakers Toastmasters Club, and a former member of our own center's Leadership Council. And Ron's biggest love is his family, which comprises of his beautiful wife, Fonnie, who is here today with us. Thank you, Fonnie, for being here. Their 2 amazing daughters, Nicole and Ashley, 3 dogs and 2 cats. So I'd love to just welcome you up here, Ron, give you a nice, wonderful message. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that beautiful introduction and for reminding me about the 2 cats. I love the cats. Thank you, Gail. Yeah, I know. For some of you who probably don't know, my phone has been going off. My family up north, who may be watching me right now, I don't know. It's my birthday today, so yeah, thank you. And what a pleasure to be here. And, first of all, thank everybody for being here. I didn't know I was going to have this big of a birthday party. I didn't know this many people were going to show up, but it's joyful. And I also want to thank Melissa for doing that wonderful meditation. Who's here for that meditation? Yeah, she anchored in some of the words and concepts of thoughts that I had as I was putting together this talk. And even, the reading and the songs about nature. Nature kind of fits into absolutely everything, and it is our witness of what we see in the world that brings us closer to the divine, which is really what we're talking about today. It is the one and only. That's the topic for today, and it is called the one and only because there is nothing else. Ernest Holmes calls it the thing itself. Wallace Wattles, the author of Science of Getting Rich, and the Science of Getting Well, and the Science of Being Great, calls it the thinking stuff that permeates and penetrates the interspaces of the universe. Many of the religious and ancient teachings refer to it slightly different, but many of them start to agree that it is grand. It perhaps is beyond our scope of imagination, but what we look at is it is the one thing and it is the only thing. It's what connects us. And so when we say the one and only, we're describing that, but then again, you are the one and only because you are the individual expression of that one, and there's no other you. True? And the more that we can embrace this understanding of this divine, the more that we can walk completely liberated in our life, free in our emotions, and be a beacon of light that can really shine in this world. Now, Ernest Holmes talks about it's one mind, but shares that there's 2 aspects. And I know if I was to call on any of the practitioners, they would probably come up with what those 2 aspects are. It is the objective and subjective, or it is the conscious and the subconscious. It is the seed and the soil. It is the idea or the volition or the choice. And it is the way or the law that makes it happen. All within the one mind, all within all spaces and even in nature. We see that. And for those of you that have ever practiced the traditional 5-step, I know there's a 7-step, but the 5 steps of a prayer treatment, raise your hand if you're familiar with the 5 steps. So quite a few hands have gone up. So you've taken classes, or maybe you read The Science of Mind, or you learned it here on a Sunday morning. But the first 2 steps, actually the first step is really that recognition of that God is all there is, the infinite, the divine, the all-good, the loving substance of the universe. And the second step is, I am one with that. So it's proclaiming the divine, but it's not saying that I am less than or I am separate, because it is impossible to be separate if it is infinite. True? And the infinite creates out of itself, but it cannot be added to or multiplied because it already is whole. It's already perfect. It's already complete. Nor can it be divided or separated from. So the more that we practice prayer treatment, and Ernest Holmes called it treatment as opposed to prayer because it was like a doctor treating for a patient, giving a treatment, prescribing a treatment, and articulating with the words what is called divine truth, that there is one and only one, and I am one with that. By practicing this, the practitioner, or everybody really truly is a practitioner when you're practicing a treatment, is basically you're putting power into power. The ultimate power, which is the all that is, which is the one and only. The individual puts power into power with the word and with affirming, there is only one thing and I am one with it. I always use the analogy of the old farm tractors. I grew up working on my uncle's farm, and we had a John Deere B, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with some of the old tractors. They didn't have what's called starters, like you have in your car when you turn a key. They had this big thing called a flywheel. Roger's nodding his head. This big, massive, cylindrical object that my uncle would sit there, and he would just start spinning and spinning and spinning, and then engage it, and of course the engine would turn over, and then the spark plugs would fire, and of course there was power being put into power. And that is that machine that creates wonderful works within the fields of farms. But if we look at the fact that the practitioner uses that connection by stating there is only one thing, I am one with it, and coming from the intellectualized, conceptualized view and internalizing it with the emotion of conviction, they create power within power, and they can move mountains. And so the best thing that we can do is to be able to practice that. But beyond that, we have nature. We have the display or the array of humanity. And the more that we can connect and create unity consciousness within ourselves, the more that we can align with the one. Because in some cases, some people have a hard time intellectualizing. They need to actually feel it. And the last thing would be totally free within the mind, free of all that mental chatter, free of all those dramas and traumas and things that we carry life through us, free so we can be. When we are in that mode of being able to create unity consciousness, it is being able to look at the other person and see God, see a reflection of the self, because we are one with that. And a game that I love to play is basically imagining that we have these things called past lives. How many people think that yeah, even if you have an inclination, right? If I'm this much of a miracle in this now moment, and I exist, I always exist, perhaps there's the possibility that I had a lot of these other fancy things called past lives. Dr. Raymond Moody calls it the reason why we don't remember. It's much like going from the living room into the kitchen and walking in there and saying, I don't even know why I'm here, right? This happened to me just this morning walking through these doors. Okay, I'm supposed to speak, but what am I supposed to say? But with that, not necessarily having the knowledge, we can play the game. We can play the game. We can connect. We can pick that avatar. Just like in the movie The Avatar. Who's seen that movie? Right? The famous line, I see you. I see you. It's about connection. And if we were to create a past life, just to play around with it, and we chose perhaps the opposite of what we are, maybe a different race, a different culture, a different belief, a religious belief, maybe a different gender, right? Maybe we're the victim, or maybe we're the villain. Maybe we caused great crimes. Maybe we were the ones that were perpetrated on. And we begin to start to feel that life. And this is great if you do it with a partner. Each of you actually takes and describes an avatar of a past life experience and then goes into speaking it in first person as I am this, and this is how I was raised. This was, perhaps my childhood was difficult. I didn't have a lot of money or whatever. So we start to come from that mindset, and we recognize with what's called compassion. And we connect to all things. Because perhaps we lived thousands of lives. Perhaps we lived the flip side of what we are right now. Perhaps we walked within different bodies and different traumas and dramas. We don't really know. I mean, I often thought this would be a wonderful board game. Just like the board of life, we just call it the game of past lives. Roll the dice, fall in a few squares. Maybe you're Moses parting the Red Sea. Maybe you're a Palladian from another galaxy. I don't know. But it's that feeling of the other person's scenario. Even feel that person that cut you off on traffic, right? What is their life all about? How can we feel that? How can we be like that avatar and say, I see you? Because it's in that feeling space that we recognize God. It's that feeling space that we come together. And it's that feeling space where we drop all of our opinions or our need to be right, and we become unified. Now, the other thing is to be free in the mind. And I've always struggled with this. I mean, who hasn't? It's a daily practice. There's just so many things that are going on in the world. And just like the song, it's like being a witness of nature. Sometimes with all this cool, great technology, it's time to put down the cell phone and pick up the leaf. Or be the witness of the blossoming flower. It's slowing ourselves down and being more connected instead of speeding ourselves up and having to have all the electronics and being glued to it and hypnotized by it. It's like television and news. It's no wonder they call it a program or television, right? So the more that we can actually break away from that, the more we can free our mind and also become fully present. Release the burdens, the problems, the things that have happened. They're over and they've happened. Become completely full with the now. And not be trapped up in the worries about tomorrow, which is not yet here. So I learned this through a very big life lesson when I was in sales. Many of you have heard my sales stories. I tell a lot of sales stories because sales was the journey through my life where I connected with a lot of people. But in the mid-90s, I was suffering what's called a dry spell. They talk about these ebbs and flows, and you always have to keep your pipeline full. Well, my pipeline was like absolutely empty. And of course, most salespeople, including myself, you kind of spend your entire commission check thinking it's always just going to be there. And I ended up having a few things got canceled, and I had this one appointment, and I drove to Northern Virginia to meet this company, and as I walked through the door, in my mind I thought, this was like the sale that was going to actually save my month, right? It was going to put money in the bank. And I get out of my car, and I no sooner open the door, and the gentleman said, "I'm sorry, we've kind of canceled the appointment. We have a budget freeze." And I'm like, "Yeah, but maybe freeze the budget on everything else, but buy my product." And as it turned out, that didn't go through. In my car, as I'm driving back home, back to my office, I was kind of like, I will take anything. Give me anything, right? I want something now. And as it turned out, within about a day later, I had this message from my boss on my answering machine that basically was a little bit frazzled and broken up, but basically I could hear hot lead, ready to buy, and then his voice faded out, and then I heard the word unicorn. And I played it over again because I just like was the last part was like I have a unicorn. Hot lead, ready to buy, unicorn. Is this what I was asking for? And as it turned out, when I got to my office, in the fax machine was the lead, and it was Unicor Federal Prison Industries. I was going to prison. I'm like, give me anything but not this, right? But it was actually two machines, not one. Both of them were like $20,000 a piece. It's a $40,000 order, ready to buy. I called the gentleman. He actually had a purchase order already issued. I didn't have to go out there and demonstrate it. They were ready to buy. But the thing was I actually had to deliver into the prison. I had to set it up, and I had to train inmates on using this device. It's a computerized sign making machine, cuts vinyl letters. And so I set up the appointment. It was about 2.5 hours. And, in my mind, I was still frustrated over the fact, I have to go to a prison. Of course, you have to get clearance because it's a federal prison. And I'm like, as long as you do the clearance while I'm still outside before I go in, because I'd hate to they find something like, you didn't pay that speeding ticket or... So they do the clearance, I show up, I'm there, of course, on my way. Maybe it's just because the vibration I was in, the frustration I was in, I get a rock that comes off of a truck, chips my window. The exit I take for Cumberland, Maryland, which is on the way to Unicor Federal Prison, I stop at a McDonald's, I go to get a coffee. It's one of those transfers where the grab wasn't that good and the coffee went all over my pants. And of course, I'm blaming the attendant, and it's really me, it's my vibration. But I want to blame the rest of the world for everything that's going on. And I show up, and of course I've got an escort there, and you've got to go through one gate, and then they take you in a truck, and they bring you all the way to a second gate. You're going through two places just to get inside. And I show up, and I'm actually explaining to my pants, and he's like, "Oh, we've got a uniform for you." So as he escorts me, I get inside, and the very first thing was I looked at it, the boxes had already, the tape was broken, the packing slip was out. I'm like, no, this is going to get messed up. There were 3 boxes, not 4. But there was a lovely inmate, and this is really what changed my life. I realized that here I am, and I watched so many fearful movies, and these are kind gentlemen. This is this all-male prison, and you don't know what somebody's in for. You don't even ask, but you know that they're in there and they're serving time, and they've been serving for a while, and some of them are going to serve for continuous. They may not get out for a while. And I'm frustrated because, of course, everything's not going right, and here are boxes that are opened, and I look at the packing list, and actually the one missing box, one of the inmates actually found it, brought it to me. When I finally find the packing list, it's like a checklist. They checked off everything, and this one thing called the knife was crossed out, and it's completely missing. It's this 1/4-inch little carbon tip thing that slits vinyl that's only like a 2 microns thick. It could never kill a flea. And yet it's called a knife, so they did what prisons do. So my whole time was wasted, and I actually had to get another one ordered. We had to call it something completely different, not a knife. And then I had to drive out another 2.5 hours to actually set up and to train and everything. But here's the thing. This one inmate that laughed, that was fully present, that was kind, that was patient, and all the frazzle and all the things that I was going through, I couldn't help but just notice that he was like the most beautiful soul in a prison. And as I started to have conversation and let my guard of fear down, I remember asking him, how can you be so happy while being in a prison? And the words that he shared with me is basically, I may be a prisoner in a prison, but in my mind, I am free. Imagine that. In myself, I wasn't free. I was in the real world. I was troubled by everything that I thought should have been a different way, should have been better, focusing on all the things that I could have had, should have done, all the shoulds. How many times do we get caught up in that, being a prisoner in our own mind and our own thoughts? And so, by the practice, and that's what spiritual practice is. That's what a practitioner is, always bringing into practice. And there are so many ways that we can do this. There is prayer, there is yoga, there is gratitude, there's meditation, there's being out in nature, there's the emotional healing technique or the tapping. So there's so many things that we can do. And I would say, take classes. Take classes here. Be engaged in classes and programs within your own center. And that's really where you can free the mind and feel connected. Because if we do all these things and we practice all these things, we become radiant beings that can transform this planet by the nature of transforming ourselves. Change our mind, change our thoughts, change our life, change the world. That is the one and only. And you are the one and only that can make that happen. Let's bring this into prayer. As I recognize that regardless of what's going on in a grander scheme of life or humanity or whatever we may call it, I know that back of all things there is this infinite, all-loving presence called Spirit, called God, called the divine creator of humanity. And it is that which is beauty, that which is love, that which is joy, that which is creation. And as I know that I am one with this infinite source, this divine love beauty of the universe, that it breathes me and exists as me, and it's carried through in my words of this prayer, I know this same truth for all radiant beings of light sitting here within the Center for Spiritual Living as well as watching online. I know this all for humanity. And with that, I anchor in the truths of the Divine One that is always present as the abundant life that is the divine life, the well-being, the joy, the peace, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the unity, the oneness, the radiant life of truth. It's with gratitude that I release these words, knowing they're done, and together we say, and so it is. Namaste.